Yeah, hello everybody, how are you doing? Are you enjoying the festival, yeah? Brilliant, brilliant. I wish I was here yesterday. It looks such a cool place.
Yeah. We're celebrating this year 30 years of Trainspotting, actually. Yeah. People are changing, music is changing, drugs are changing, and we see it here. Listen to Ziggy Pop, who's been on stage 2 days ago.
I saw him in the hotel this morning, kind of going for a walk with his wife. And yeah, I know, I heard that he was very, very good 2 days ago. So a bit sad to miss that.
How do you feel about this change? Did things really change? Because when you were writing Trainspotting, Scotland was facing, let's say, a brutal change, a brutal revolution. Basically, your heroes are, let's say, counter-heroes, the people that are not included in the new order of things. Things are looking kind of similar right now, or not?
Oh, they're much worse because the process of ongoing destruction of humanity is drawing more and more people in, like, sort of, economically, financially, kind of socially, spiritually, we're really being drawn into this kind of bizarre world where we know that capitalism's coming to an end, but we don't know how to replace it. We don't really seem to have any idea of what is going to come next. So we're in a kind of really interesting time in history, and quite a dangerous time. So yeah, I mean, it's a great time to be a writer. I mean, it's a terrible time to be a human being, but a great time to be a writer.
Your book was a massive hit, and it still is. So you already signed some copies of it. You mentioned in an interview that the early success and the fact that you managed to write a lot of good books in a few years was, let's say, bothering, maybe for the literary word. Is early success, I don't know, a trap or?
I think in some ways it's a great thing if your first book becomes an international bestseller. I mean, that's what writers strive to do all the time, is to have that kind of cultural impact with a book. So it's a very good thing. But I think it's like what I found was that writing comes really easy to me. There's no struggle. And a lot of writers really struggle to get every single word out. It's a big fight for them to get stuff on the page. And I do actually empathize with that, because I was the same with music. I was obsessed with music, and I wanted to be a musician. But it just wouldn't come the way I wanted it to. I wasn't really that bothered about writing. I wasn't that bothered about literature. But it just came so easy to me. So I feel that I had a lot of rejection in music, but I didn't have any there's been no downside to me in writing at all. So the people in the literary establishment back in Britain, they absolutely hate me because I don't do all this torture. Oh my God, it's like, to me it comes very easy. And if I'd written all these books, like the first maybe half a dozen books I'd written, if I'd written them over maybe a 30-year period, instead of like a kind of 7-year period, I would have been probably kind of more acceptable to them, because that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to struggle and, rather than just fire them out. And I mean, I find that, the publisher can't keep up with me, basically. I'm just, I've got stacks of kind of books that I'm just ready to keep bringing out. In lockdown, I mean, it was fabulous. All I did was write, basically.
Let's talk a bit about your passion, let's say, for music. You started with a punk band, if I remember well, and then that didn't really work out so well, or?
No, it was terrible. I mean, it's like, how can you be like, the whole point of being in a punk band is that you can't play your instruments. How can you get kicked out of punk bands for not being able to play? But I forgot the second bit they don't talk about is that the idea is that you can't play your instruments, but the idea is that you actually get better together. And all the rest of these guys slowly got better together, and I never. If anything, I got worse. I was like, I was the only guy to go and be in a band for 2 years and become a worse guitarist when I came out the band, basically. And I was a terrible singer, have no voice at all. I was a terrible guitarist. I was an even worse bassist. I didn't want to demean myself by trying to play the drums. I was done after that time. I couldn't keep up with the drummer. I couldn't keep time with our drummer. And I thought, you're never, let's face it, you're just never going to do anything in music. But the good thing was that I did write a lot of songs, and I tended to write ballads, which are really just short stories, that set to music. So I thought, stop setting this stuff to music. Your music's shit, basically. But your stories might be okay. I didn't really know if they were at that time.
And then the second Summer of Love happened in the UK. That was huge. In Romania, we were kind of busy with the revolution and getting rid of communism and doing the transition thingy. So for us, it wasn't that relevant. How close were you to, let's say, the DJs that came from Ibiza with the new?
It kind of saved my life, basically. A lot of the people that were involved in that scene were friends of mine. They were old punks and old soul boys. And I remember when Danny came back from Ibiza with Paul Oakenfold, Danny Rampling came back from Ibiza with Paul Oakenfold and Nicky Holloway and Johnny Walker. They were all in a race to open up a club in London. And Danny got there first with Shoom. And I remember that, that was just like an absolutely fabulous time. It was a crazy time. And I was very, I don't know, has anybody ever seen the film Basic Instinct with Michael Douglas? Remember that bit where Michael Douglas goes into this club with all these freaky people and he's got this really stupid, lame pullover on? That was what I was like the first time in Shoom. Everybody's got all this baggy kind of acid house gear. And I've got this crappy kind of, this yuppie thing, because believe it or not, I was very, very anti-drugs, because kind of at the start of the 80s, I'd been a heroin addict, and then I kind of cleaned up, got this nice job, got this nice wife, this nice house, and I was sort of, and when I started to go out again, people were taking all these strange drugs, all these ecstasies, and I was thinking, oh, no, we can't have this and all that, And then I didn't get it at all. The music was just rubbish. It was just loud, repetitive noise. There was no lyrics in it. There was no kind of, there was no focal point. It was just people dancing around. There was a DJ in the booth you could barely see. And then my friend Susan, I was moaning about it. I was actually saying all this. I was verbalizing all this. And she just went, shut the up, and pushed an ecstasy into my mouth, basically. And of course, like bang, of course, about kind of two or 3 hours later, I had kind of convinced myself that I invented acid house and rave and all that, and it wouldn't have happened without me. So it was a total convert kind of thing, and it gave me a lot of going out and raving and hooking up with a lot of my old punk mates who became ravers and were putting on sound systems all over the country. It was just fabulous, and I was right back out again. I thought, this 9-to-5 job's not going to last. So I got a set of decks and I started DJing myself. And then I started writing. I just was so inspired that I wanted to write, and the writing took off and kind of pushed the DJing aside a little bit. But I never really liked DJing that much, because I always wanted to be on the other side of the decks. I was always the one kind of in front of the speakers, in front of the sound system, getting blasted by it. It's it was like I would come back from a rave and it would still be buzzing, and I thought, this is my one chance to do something creative, and got all my old stories back together again and started to put them in a book form.
And now you have a label, basically, after some years.
Yeah, I mean, we started this label, kind of dance music label called this is Jack the Cat. Jack said what? So give us a follow on Instagram if you want. We've done a lot of really. We've knocked out a phenomenal amount of records in the last year. We've brought back some kind of old favourites, some mates of ours like kind of John Carter and Serge Santiago and Lisa Moorish, who were kind of sort of 90s figures basically. And we've got a lot of really brilliant young artists now as well, on the label. So it's absolutely, we have these nights out all over the country, and it's absolutely fabulous. It's just a great vibe.
In that time, electronic music, be it acid house on one side or drum and bass or jungle, had, let's say, a political meaning or a political impact. It was a music of a generation that wasn't really represented or accepted. So it was a bit of a rebellion. Right now, things are getting, let's say, more commercial. Festivals are costing a kidney and a half. Did music become soulless in the process?
I think what happened, I mean, it's like, punk was seen as the ultimate rebels music. But in Britain, there was a lot of outrage about punk, but nothing really, the government and all that never felt kind of ready to intervene or anything like that. And house was supposed to be, house and rave music, acid house, and was supposed to be non-political, it's supposed to be about hedonism. But the government came in with the criminal justice bill to outlaw raves and sound systems. So there was something that the power of the collective was kind of re-established, because Thatcher kind of, they kind of smashed the unions, they kind of smashed the football hooligan gangs. They didn't like people congregating, they didn't like working class people congregating in large numbers, and every piece of legislation was to stop that. So when people started going to raves, they felt very threatened, and the big corporate brewing interests felt very threatened, because people weren't drinking; they were taking drugs. Basically, they were taking kind of street drugs. So it was quite it wasn't avowedly political. It wasn't its intention to be political, but it was kind of politicized by the response of the state.
A lot of your characters are, let's say, like I said before, counter-revolutionaries. They're rebels, they're misfits, they don't fit, they're trash, is it possible to be a rebel when you're not in your 30s anymore? How do you...
I don't think it's possible to be a rebel when you're kind of... once you get to about 26, you're basically, so I think... it's like... Because when you get to 26, your sense of mortality starts kicking in, and you become a bit more, you start thinking of the future, you become a bit more risk aversive. So that's, I think it's very difficult to be a rebel in that kind of sense. I think it's, and it's that thing, it's like, that's the great thing about being young. You can do anything you like, and people just indulge you. You can look... you can take loads of drugs or drink loads of alcohol and just walk down the high street all fucked up, and they'll say, "Oh, look at that young guy's having fun. He's out there. He's enjoying himself." You try doing that at my age, they go, "Get that old fucking bum, that pervert, off the streets and fucking throw him in prison." So the same behaviour, people react to it in different ways, and and so they should as well. But yeah, I think that. It is, rebellion and revolution and change and all that kind of stuff, like kind of fighting wars and all that stuff. They're unfortunately kind of young punters' games. But the great thing about this era also is that we refuse to grow up at the same time. So we've still got kind of a little toehold into that.
A lot of people thought of your books as being, at a certain degree, some sort of autobiography. So I'm guessing that, okay, we're not young, really young anymore. This autobiography part, it's getting less important in your writing, or you still have, you're still discovering in yourself some sources for this?
Well, it's strange because sometimes the bits that you think are quite autobiographical, nobody recognizes them, and then some old pals will look at something and they'll say, "Oh, that was the time that we did this and we did that." And I think, "Fuck, so it was." Like, you know, you don't really, because it's such a subconscious process when you write fiction. You're not really sure where it all comes from, and I think that to me it's like you have that thing, sort of. My God, it's like you have that horror when you've written something. You think, God, what's my mum going to say about this? You know, or what's my wife or my kids? You can always find somebody that's going to sort of that you think I shouldn't really be doing this because they're going to see it, like, you know. And unless I have that feeling, it's a really horrible feeling. But unless I have that feeling, the book doesn't work. You know, so it's something that makes me feel very uncomfortable. Is paradoxically the thing that makes me feel comfortable to bring it out.
Do you have the writer's block, or is something that you don't experience really?
I don't experience it. I've never had it. You know, I think it's. I think, you know, it's like going back to what I say. I think you just if you, I mean, the thing about it is, I think sometimes. People think about writer's block. They expect to write something good all the time. Sometimes the stuff you write is a lot of shit, basically, you know. And you know, you have to try and write through that until you get to good stuff, you know. So yeah, I mean, I think, you know, that writing is rewriting. So you just carry on and you just kind of overwrite whatever you do. Yeah?
You did scripts, you did television, you did theater plays, you did videos for bands even. Is this, I don't know, permanent diversity keeping you, part of keeping you, I don't know, creative? It's important for you to move and change?
I think it's just fun, and I think these things like... I think that the more you get into something, the more you realize that every kind of creative endeavor is basically has got the same process that goes on. You know, if you're doing music, and I think that's one of the things about I'm not a, you know, I'm a kind of basically an analog, a digital guy who wants to be an analog guy, you know. I mean, I know that I was rubbish. I wouldn't have been able to write a thing without a computer. I wouldn't have been able to write longhand. I couldn't play guitar or sing and all that, but I can make music now that is digital. I can make it, you know, I can sit there with instrumentations on a mixing desk and keyboards and stuff. And I think it has enabled me, but it also shows you in a digital world how the process of creating something, whether it's like fiction or whether it's music, and even now, some people, like, if you look at some the way that art is done now, you know, it's very rare. It's a painter with a brush and an easel, you know. It's like there's a lot of there's a digitalization of art and all that. So it does help you break down what kind of creativity is, basically. So it's easier, you know. Filmmaking's the same. Filming's the very same thing as well. It's you see the connections. Digital is kind of showing you the connections between these different disciplines.
Are you still having fun writing?
Yeah, the best time ever. I mean, I had to, like, it was great because usually what happens is that, you know, I'll be sitting in my house enjoying myself writing, and my wife will say, "Oh, we've got people coming round, so leave your imaginary friends and come down and speak to your real friends," like, you know. And I'll be going, and it great. And lockdown was the best time ever because I just got left alone. To, you know, this is great. You know, I could kind of sit here for days and sort of just write, basically, like, you know. And nobody's, you know, and then you get all these people going, "Oh, we're doing a podcast for lockdown." And I go, "F your podcast! I don't want to be on your shite podcast." Everybody's doing a fucking podcast now. It's terrible. The worst thing to come out of lockdown was people doing podcasts. The second worst thing was Zoom calls. Let's go on a Zoom. No, they're a waste of time.
Talking about having fun and not necessarily taking things too seriously, right now there's a Trainspotting musical happening. How did that happen?
Well, I did this. Like, there's a producer, big producer in the West End, who's a friend of mine, Phil McIntyre, and he does We Will Rock You, the Queen musical. He does a lot of these big West End musicals, and he was always on at me to do Trainspotting as a musical, and I was like, no, it's just a bad idea, you know. And then you kind of get older and you think to yourself, if I don't do this now, when I'm dead and gone, I'm in an urn on someone's mantelpiece, some fucking arsehole like Andrew Lloyd Webber is going to come along and make loads of money out of it, you know. So no way, no. So I think, well, I can actually do this better if I'm just left to my own devices. So he was kind of a bit nervous when I said to him, great, we're going to write all our own songs for it, because he wanted to license the songs from the film. And I'm saying, no, we're writing all our own songs. So he was a bit sketchy about this at first, like, you know. So, but he's come round to the idea now. I think we're licensing a couple of songs from the film, and but most of the songs are songs we've written ourselves, across all different genres, like kind of, you know, house, techno, disco, blues, country and western, sort of northern soul. So quite a range of different things.
Now that you mentioned the soundtrack of Trainspotting, I mean, the movie was great, the writing is amazing, but half maybe of the experience was also the music, because there were anthems, or I don't know, music of a generation, the soundtrack of a generation. Did you have a saying in the soundtrack of the movie or not?
Well, the soundtrack was one of these beautiful accidents, because we didn't have any money to pay anybody, you know, and it was fortunate that, like, Danny Boyle had worked with both Underworld and Left Field, and he got like Neil Barons from Left Field and the Underworld guys back involved again, and I'd been to. I was hanging out at. I had this mate, a good pal of mine, Steve Malloy, Fatty Malloy, had this bar and grill thing at the Fortress Studios in London, and all the bands used to play there. They always used to rehearse there, like kind of Primal Scream, who I kind of knew, but I got to know like Blur and Pulp and Oasis, and all these guys were there, you know. So we said to them, what about donating a track to this film that we've done? And I'd met Iggy Pop in New York, and so we had all these kind of direct contacts, and we were able to go past agents and management and all that, and just ask them, you know, if they would contribute. We actually had a screening with where, you know, we put where the tracks would go in, and we had a screening for all the musicians, and they were like, "Oh yeah, this is fucking great. Let's do this." So it was, you know, I mean, it's like that. I think that, I mean, we would have had to pay maybe about $1 million to license those tracks, and £1 million to license all those tracks, and £1 million was the entire budget of the film, basically. So it's kind of, it was never going to happen unless we pulled in favors.
Moving in, let's say, more serious or more formal part of the discussion, you are never afraid to be, let's say, political, to express some views in, I don't know, European Union, Scottish independence, other, let's say, difficult topics. Should a writer be political? How political can a writer get?
I don't really. I mean, obviously, everybody's got their own sort of politics, their own political views. I mean, I think when I write, I try to create characters that have got kind of not necessarily the same views as me, but would kind of challenge the views that I would have. And I think it's like, I think you kind of, you write in a very politicized environment, you know, so you can't really get away from it if you're addressing the big issues of today. But I wouldn't I've never been like party political. I don't support any party. I mean, I would never support like the Labour or Conservatives or the SNP or Liberal Democrats. I mean, that kind of politics doesn't really interest me.
Staying on this part of the conversation, you mentioned in an interview that you were writing in a book about a trans person, and you had a consultant. And first you thought it was a bad idea or censorship, and then you realized that, okay, this is great, you actually got a lot of information. How did that experience work, to work with an advisor, let's say?
Well, I mean, it's such a... This issue is such a sort of it's very new in terms of its kind of social sort of profile, and it's changing all the time. The understanding of it's changing all the time, and to me it was a hard one to get a hold of, because there's no two trans experiences that are the same almost. It's like, it's still kind of finding its feet in terms of the culture around it, and what I wanted to do was to I was a bit kind of I've never had anything like that at first, and I was a bit kind of concerned when the publisher showed me the report, but it was very positive and very helpful, and it was kind of helping me to find more in the characters that I was writing about, and so I found it really interesting and really helpful and very, very educative to me. The only thing is now it's probably out of date, because anybody who follows this issue knows that the language changes around it, the politics change around it almost daily. It is such a sort of, it is such an interesting thing, and it ties in with where we're going as a species in a way. It was part of the whole kind of transhumanist kind of sort of post-human kind of ideologies, and and you stick it into artificial intelligence, you stick it into the end of capitalism, the end of the division of labour, the breaking down of sexual and gender roles and stereotypes, and then you stick yourself, well, maybe not, maybe it's just a sort of a kind of collective insanity that we've all jumped upon. So you don't really know. It's not really panned out in any way to be culturally decisive. And I think when you do write something, you have a responsibility not to be not to get as right as you possibly can, and not to be harmful to marginalised and dispossessed people by peddling kind of not it's like, if it's by peddling something that isn't the case, basically, like, you've got to kind of try to, you can create characters that are as diverse or as fucked up as you like, but you've got to make sure that isn't a stereotypical experience. It's like, you get loads of archetypes within every sort of group, basically.
You can do it. Where do you, let's say, get your buzz, your sources from? Do you still go to pubs? Do you still have beers with people, listen to stories? Because once you mentioned in an interview that, okay, Scotland, it's about storytelling. Everybody's telling stories while drinking or while at home or over dinner. Or is it still a good source of inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, it's like... I lived part of the year in Miami, and Miami is a very visual culture. Nobody really speaks to each other; they just look at each other and kind of, they're all in the gym all day, and they're all kind of dressed up and sort of in their beachwear, and they're kind of sort of. So the culture is narcissistic, but in a very visual way. In Scotland, it's the reverse. Everybody looks like shit, but the culture is narcissistic in a very sort of talkative way. Everybody wants to tell everybody else their opinion of everything that's going on in the world, and kind of convince them of their view and browbeat them into this sort of this kind of way of seeing things and all that. So you can't. I mean, it's like I can basically walk out the door when I'm back in Edinburgh, and I've got material for half a dozen books. I mean, you can't stop people basically trying to tell you about things in Scotland. Whereas Miami, you just have to kind of sit back and you're kind of you might get some kind of disclosure from someone, but it's like I notice when I'm writing about Miami, I'm writing visual descriptions all the time because it is a very visual culture because of the light, whereas Scotland is a very oral culture basically.
When we're hearing English, we're hearing, okay, one language basically, and we think about one culture, but it's totally different. It's Scotland, it's one thing, Miami, it's another thing. How was your American experience basically?
Well,
Were you exotic or?
Yeah, I mean, I lived for 10 years in America, and my ex-wife was American, and when I used to say that my wife doesn't understand me, it wasn't like a chat-up line in a pub or anything like that. It was just a simple description, you know. It's like my voice was quite impenetrable. So I started talking really slowly in this kind of wanky transatlantic American accent, and I would go home back to Edinburgh and be in the Central Bar in Leith, and all my mates would be sitting around the table just looking at me, you know, staring at me, you know, and I thought, I've got to get this out of the way, you know. So I would say something like, okay guys, I'm just going over to the restroom. The f***ing restroom, hear 'em! You know, so you get this in response, this outrage kind of response, but it broke the ice, you know, so then I could kind of, you know, they just wanted to make sure that I hadn't changed too much, basically. But it was a fabulous experience, and I've still lived part of the year there, so I do like going back. But I mean, 10 years was good. It was a good 10 years because I kind of started working in Hollywood, kind of doing script doctoring. My manager and my agent are still across there, so I had a really good time, basically, in the States.
Cool. I want to give you the mic because I'm sure you have questions.
Hello.
Hi,
I have one question for you. As a writer, how do you know if an idea is worth it, if you should follow up on that train of thought or it's not?
Yeah, I think the problem is you don't really know until you write it down. You know, you just have to run with it for a while. And I think the good thing about it is I've found that nothing is really wasted. You kind of it sounds like that Blur song, "Nothing is wasted, only reproduced." But you take something and it might not work for the particular piece that you're trying to do, but it's always there, you know. So it's always worth exploring an idea or a character or a theme by writing it. And even if it doesn't work from the piece that you're trying to do, it might take you somewhere else, and it might be somewhere better that it takes you. So you have to stick with it, I think.
And if you have multiple ideas, for example, if your mind is storming itself.
Well, so all the better. All the better, you know. You kind of you can't, you know, I mean, you can jot them all down, and you have to run with one or two of them. You can't run with them all at the same time, but all the better for there, you know. And sometimes you have to put something in a drawer, give it a month or so, and see if it jumps out. I mean, that's the problem with ideas, is they're all brilliant when you write them down, but some of them stand the test of time better than others.
Thank you very much.
Hello. So it was very interesting to hear that writing comes very easy for you, but not so for music. And I was curious, should you fight for something if you like it? Like it feels like almost it's against your nature because it doesn't come natural, but still you tried and.
Yeah, I think what you do then, and it's taken me, as I was saying, it's taken me to get to the digital kind of era to appreciate this, is that you think about the process of the creativity rather than the actual content of it. So you're thinking about, what is it I'm actually doing here, you know? And I think that helps. Like, you know, it does. It's like, you know, when I used to think about music, for example, and it wasn't coming easy to me, I was thinking about, I was so wrapped up in trying to keep my fingers on these kind of, get my fingers down this fretboard or across this keyboard and all that. I wasn't looking at the actual process of what we were doing. Like, I wasn't saying that, this is the drums and bass or the rhythm section. They're the essence of what we're trying to get going, and the guitars going on top of that to give it texture and layers, and then the voice is going on top of that, and then we might have strings and horns and all that. So I wasn't seeing it in terms of the process, but I think the great thing about the digital thing is it makes you much more aware of what you're actually doing. I just thought it was a bunch of guys in a room clowning around trying to jam something out, which kind of, with me involved, it was going to take a long, long time.
Hi. Quick question. Going back to the beginning of your talk where you were saying that punk was created basically because the world was up and all these amazing genres came basically out of necessity from you guys. You could argue that our world is similarly fucked, but we kind of interact with social issues through a phone now. We don't really meet in squares and burn down police cars or anything. How dangerous do you think that this is for writing and music and all this creation going onward?
I think it's very it's interesting and very dangerous, and the big fear is that we're actually moving into a post-cultural world. We're moving into a world where culture and art doesn't need to exist because, forget AI, because we're making people into human robots. We don't really have a street culture now. We have a media culture, which is all online, and I think that that's the kind of thing that we have to fight against. So, I mean, even coming to a festival and just hanging out with other people, to me, is such an important thing. It's a massive kind of act of rebellion against the screen and against this kind of increasingly constricting world where our algorithms dictate the kind of content that we're going to see. And I think that. My worry is that we don't need writing, we don't need art, we don't need music. We just kind of we're being kind of dumbed down to the extent that basically it doesn't matter if some robot kind of makes the next clutch of songs. We're not really that bothered about it. We just need some kind of noise in the background while we obey the next set of commands that our algorithms or the whole capitalist corporate kind of state is giving us.
Hello. You are writing in Transpotting about the late 80s, about poverty, things that we also experienced like in the 90s in Romania. If you could do a short parallel between, I don't know, being young or young generation back then and today, who has it harder?
I think the whole thing that's happened to us all is that physical threat, the physical danger about people going out and getting involved in street confrontations with other gangs of youth, getting involved in football thuggery, a lot of that has gone right down. The physical danger has gone down because the phone and the cameras and kind of CCTV and all that. But I think that because we've been driven into the technology, the psychological jeopardy and peril for young people now is so much more intense than it used to be. I think, in our youth, we basically had the idea that things could get better, that we would make things better. For youth now, it doesn't seem to be like that. They seem to be all members of the precariat, and they seem to have a sort of an expectation that we've created this kind of zoo that doesn't really suit us. It doesn't really suit them, and online just seems to be full of kind of social and psychological jeopardy for kids now. It's not. So I think psychologically they have a much harder time than we did. They don't have the physical danger, perhaps, that they used to have, but psychologically they have a much harder time. And I think because they don't have the physical danger and they have the psychological jeopardy, there's a tendency to catastrophize everything, and it's quite punitive for them. So it's a tough time to grow up, definitely.
Hiya. thank you first and foremost for everything you've ever written. It was a massive, massive part of my 20s. So thank you very much. If I well recall, you gave an interview in The Guardian or The Observer a few years back, and you were saying you were there signing books and people were still trying to pass on gear to you. Like, to say thank you, basically, right? And you just replying by saying, shit, you did not get anything from what I fucking wrote, right? So there was always going to be a risk with that, but did you ever feel responsible in a way or another for maybe fueling people's, I don't know, hedonism, if you want to call it, but capacity to self-destruct? It's a tough one, I know.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been a kind of aid. You know, I've been a sort of, I don't know, like an accessory on the coffee table, almost. But I think that people go through that phase anyway. We all go through that kind of a phase where we feel the world's a bit confining. We want to break out. It was strange because when the first book came out, it was like all the health education people were saying, this is terrible, it's going to sort of, it's going to drive people to drugs and all that. And because they had all the Just Say No kind of adverts and the Just Say No education kind of thing. And within a year, every single kind of, every single health education thing on drugs in Britain was like an outtake of Trainspotting. You know, it's like the whole thing had switched. So I was seen from being this guy who encouraged people to take drugs to this guy who was the saviour of loads. You know, every drug rehabilitation group wanted me to speak. Every sort of health education group wanted me to speak. I was speaking in the House of Commons about drugs and about drug legislation and all this sort of stuff. So it was like it was like what I was trying to write about was a kind of human trajectory, the attractiveness of drugs versus the peril that that kind of long-term drug addiction can kind of can have. And it's like I got all those letters from people saying that oh, it was great to see that, to read that book and to see that film. I was getting into it a bit too much, and then I realized I saw where it was going, so I just pulled back. You know, so thank you. And people's writing this about all their kids, kind of, so they were really happy about that. But on the other side of that, I think what happened is that the next again generation, for a lot of kids, there was just absolutely no hope. It was the second or third generation of people living in kind of housing schemes that there was no employment for. So I think that anything like that becomes this kind of, it almost becomes like a trash aesthetic, a kind of sort of, an artifact of that self-degradation. You know what I mean? And it's like, so I don't know whether it justifies it. I certainly think that the very idea that people have got no prospects, no futures, no economic prospects, no long-term, and no even short-term employment prospects is much more ruinous to that. But I think it does become part of the furniture of the whole thing, the cultural furniture, if you like.
Hi. I'm a translator, so I have a question that has to do with this. It's amazing to me and to the world, I guess, how formidable your success has been, while also writing in such a natural vernacular, which is something you don't see every day. And I was wondering what your relationship with your foreign language translators is, whether you collaborate with them, help them navigate this task.
Well, I mean, some have got a good relationship with, and I've kind of had them for ages. And other ones I don't really know, basically, and I just rely on the publisher kind of getting it right. I mean, I've got my Italian translator, a guy called Massimo, I've had from the start, and he's a fabulous writer. He's a great poet, and he used to actually live in Leith. So I think that's one of my biggest audiences outside of the English-speaking world, and I think it's because of him as a translator. So I think it's great if you get a relationship with a translator. You can't be involved all the time. And basically, I'm so poor at other languages, I don't really know. So I have to leave it to the publishers anyway, to kind of to their judgment. Yeah, I mean, I remember I was in St. Petersburg with two Russian translators. One of them had translated four of my books, and the other one had translated four of my books. And they were great pals, you know. They were drinking all this vodka, and they're going like, "This is the best translator in the whole of Russia. He is great. He is great." And I go, "No, you are the best translator." And one of them would go to the toilet, and another one would go, "He fucked up your book. I must translate the next one." You know. So I had this all night with them. Like it was fabulous.
Okay, unfortunately, our time is up. Big applause.
Thank you very much, folks. Cheers.